aircraft the necessary means to shoot down enemy aircraft and thus gain airspace superiority. Sidewinder is an air-to-air heat-seeking missile. This weapon was conceived by Dr. William B. McLean in 1949. He was assisted by a relatively small group of not scientists and engineers. For this brilliant technical achievement, Dr. McLean received the President's Award for Distinguished Federal Service from President Eisenhower in 1959. Now, during the past year, Sidewinder 1A has been produced by our NATO allies. The next flight event will hopefully demonstrate that we have successfully transmitted our engineering and production know-how to NATO. Two crusaders, led by Lieutenant Jim Kistler from Oil City, Pennsylvania, will each launch a target rocket from in front of the stands and seconds later fire a NATO Sidewinder assembled from components recently shipped here from 9 NATO countries. Now, in order not to miss the impact, I recommend that you keep your eye on the Sidewinder, which will be the second missile to be fired. A deuce! It is our only post-Korean weapon to have been proved in combat. In 1958, the Chinese nationalists shot down 4 Red Chinese MiGs over Formosa with this weapon. The Sidewinder 1A is used by the fleet, the U.S. Air Force, and our allies. Sidewinder 1C, an advanced model of the Sidewinder 1A just demonstrated, should be available to the fleet in early 1964. This new improved Sidewinder, next in our demonstration, has greater maneuverability and, by interchanging infrared and radar guidance heads, gives the interceptor an all-weather capability for either tail-on or head-on attack. Bullseye. A high-performance motor and modified airframe give the 1C an ability to attack an enemy flying at speeds up to 2.5 times the speed of sound and altitudes up to 80,000 feet. Additionally, a new continuous rod warhead is exceptionally destructive at all altitudes and can withstand the high temperatures generated in supersonic flight. Bomb delivery accuracy improves as range decreases. Danger from his own bomb fragments determines a pilot's minimum release range and, in a sense, the limit of his delivery accuracy. Knotts has devised a retarding tail assembly for existing bombs which reduces the minimum safe release range, thus improving accuracy and permitting a variety of high-speed, low-level tactics which were previously impossible. This new retardable weapon is carried in a collapsed condition. Upon release from the aircraft, the tail assembly assumes its retarding configuration if the pilot has elected to use this feature. Thus, a pilot has the option of using it as a regular bomb for targets which need penetration, or as a retarded bomb for improved accuracy or new tactics. Mr. President, distinguished guests, as a finale to our demonstrations, Carrier Air Group 11, recently returned from duty in the Western Pacific and operating from USS Kitty Hawk at sea, approaches in formation to salute you. The Air Group commander is Commander Warren O'Neill of Boston, Massachusetts. Aircraft in their wake will lay down a covering smokescreen to draw a curtain over our demonstration area and to close our program. This act will conclude your briefing at the instrumented ranges of the Naval Ordnance Test Station. Mr. President, within a few moments, you will be escorted on a tour of the station. May we wish you continuing fair winds and tides, and pledge that the might and expanding knowledge of the United States Navy stands ready to assert its role in national defense. Boatswain, pipe all hands.
Following the firepower demonstration, Mr. Kennedy drove to Michelson Laboratory, one of the world's most complete weapon research and development centers. Knott's technical progress during the 20 years since its founding was illustrated in an exhibit arranged about the main entrance to the laboratory. Michelson Laboratory is the heart of the Knott's complex. The building encompasses more than 10 acres of floor space, all serving the far-reaching needs of research and development. In this building, a weapon system may grow from concept to final fabrication. On display in a closed security area were new weapons and instruments devised for unique applications in limited war actions and counterinsurgency missions. Mr. Kennedy was able to review hardware and data on weapon systems which had been demonstrated, as well as other items not suited to a firepower demonstration. Dr. William B. McLean, the station's technical director, described briefly to Mr. Kennedy the achievements of Albert Abraham Michelson, the Navy's outstanding physicist for whom the laboratory was named. Dr. Michelson, a Naval Academy graduate, was the first American to receive the Nobel Prize in Physics. As a naval officer and scientist, he believed science to be the cornerstone of weapons development. To provide the President with a memento of his visit to the Naval Ordnance Test Station, Captain Blenman presented Mr. Kennedy with a model of the Shrike anti-radar missile, one of the most vital projects ever undertaken at Knott's. Upon leaving Michelson Laboratory, President Kennedy's motorcade drove through the community of China Lake, which is home for most of the military and civilian personnel assigned to the Naval Ordnance Test Station. This Navy-built town has grown since November 1943 as a small airport leased from Kern County and 650 square miles of barren desert land to a research and development facility worth over $300 million, with a population in excess of 12,000 and a 20-year history of distinguished progress in weapons development. Knott's began its career with a new concept and plan as a joint military-civilian venture in which both partners would contribute their special skills. In 20 years, Knott's developed ordnance has proved its effectiveness, not only for the Navy, but also for the Army, Air Force, and our allies. And Knott's continues to prove the effectiveness of the military-civilian team concept. The President's first-hand look at the products and the people of the U.S. Naval Ordnance Test Station underscored our nation's capability to defend herself. The presidential briefing came to an end where it had begun, at the Naval Air Facility.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
Captain, Mr. Secretary, I want to express a warm word of appreciation to all of you. I must say I'm impressed by two things, particularly in this journey to California. First, I've never seen any healthier-looking children, which is the best advertisement that I've heard for this state, and I want to express commendation to all of the mothers and fathers who are bringing up what looks like some of our best future citizens. And I also want to express a word of thanks to all of those of you who worked for our country in this decade, those of you who fly, those of you who maintain the planes, those of you who may be the wives or the children of those who serve our country, those of you who may work in research, those who may work in civil service. I think all of us today in 1963 are proud of the fact that in one way or another, in one place or another, all of us have an opportunity to serve the United States. This is the last best hope. And I think in 1963, I cannot think of a prouder statement when asked what our occupation may be than to say, I serve the United States of America. We want to thank all of you.
6 times 10 to the 9th. Yeah, that checks. Of course the calculations are right. Can't change the tolerances. Can't change the inputs or outputs. The only thing that can be changed is my circuit. Sure, just throw away 3 months' work. Take it easy, Newman. You'll wake Wendy. Oh, honey. You've been so patient with me these last few weeks. Cut it out, you slob. That's not going to help you out of this mess. Wait a minute. If I could ease the tolerances for any given bandwidth and increase the power rating, sure, it might just get us around that etching problem. Oh, how I'd love to tell Jack Logan that this little old JP has just earned his keep. Let's see now. The odd element connects with the even element. Shin bone connects with the leg bone. The leg bone connects with the thigh bone. Newman, you dummy. What happens to fringing capacitances with that kind of image impedance? Ah! Bill Newman, genius electronics engineer. Junior professional flubbing his first real assignment. Time's run out. What am I going to tell Logan in the morning? Tell him that Bill Newman goofed when he thought he was good enough to start his career at the Naval Weapons Center. Maybe some of those other job offers are still open. That's just what you need, a new job. What you really need is some coffee. You know, it's been a year since you accepted the offer from China Lake. Remember the scenery coming up that first day? And the weather? Wendy looked lovelier than any new bride ever did. This was going to be your first job out of college, in a strange place, far from home. Remember how nervous you were? And how hard you tried to hide it from Wendy? The Naval Weapons Center, on the edge of the Mojave Desert, 2,300 feet above sea level, and 150 miles from Los Angeles. That's where you chose to begin your career. We were told that Jack Logan, our contact, would meet us in front of the administration building. That first encounter with security really made you realize the importance of the work that lay ahead. China Lake. It was like entering another world. A green world of lawns and trees. Right then, a lot of your tension began to evaporate, remember? Even the names of the streets gave you a lift. America's pride and tradition written on every corner. You wondered what your part of that tradition was going to be. You were a bit unsure. But Wendy had faith enough for both of us. More of your fears were eased when you got your first look at the man who was going to be your advisor for the next 12 months. Jack Logan was friendly and likable, not quite the gray-haired old man you'd expected. He offered to guide us to the home that had been reserved for us. We were to be located in Navy-owned housing, only a short distance away. It was a beautiful drive along Blandy, the main street, with its rows of Chinese elms. Logan pointed out the community center, home of frequent social events. Schoeffel was the biggest of 5 athletic fields on the station. And the theater, where concerts as well as movies were year-round events. The All Faiths Church, a place of worship for everyone. Wendy was impressed with a modern shopping center, which included a bank and post office. Remember how nervous you were that first day when Jack Logan showed you around? Trying so hard to play it cool, weren't you? This was the Navy's largest research and development center. Your tour of Michelson Lab was to be an impressive experience. A whole sprawling lab covered over 10 acres of floor space. But it was more than just the size that was staggering. It was the variety and complexity of the work being done. Research in solid-state physics called for advanced methods and equipment, preparing pure samples of metals, depositing thin films on optical flats, measuring their reflectivity. An interferometer determined the thickness of these films with an uncertainty less than the spacing between atoms. The electron diffraction equipment increased understanding of surface structures. An electron microscope probed into molecular universes. In microelectronics, you learn to appreciate for the first time the meaning of the term severely miniaturized. Logan explained the use of the altitude chamber for testing component materials under extreme and rapid changes of temperature and pressure. The drop table for shock and G-force testing. The heat treating of components, in this case a rocket motor, possibly for use in space probes. Then Logan showed you some end results of the center's work. Zuni, Sidewinder, Shrike. The Naval Weapons Center proved to be a technological oasis, with research and development closely linked to extensive test areas. The center developed superior weapons, big sticks that said, "Don't try it," in any language. The rocket motor test site, a giant hand capable of holding back 1,000,000 pounds of thrust. There's enough challenge in that one rig alone to satisfy a dozen JPs. And that's what you wanted from China Lake, challenge. Remember the day you drove out to the air facility to start your first work assignment? You were still a little shaky from that whirlwind tour of Michelson Lab, wondering how you could contribute to some of those high-powered programs you'd seen. NAF was home base for pilots who flew almost every kind of Navy aircraft in support of the center's programs. Many of them held scientific degrees and were part of the engineering team. Logan's group specialized in microwave antenna systems for guided missiles. Jim Selensky, 7 years at the center. Bob Miller, 4. Bernie Coleman with 1 year behind him. They were a friendly bunch and made you feel a little less unsure. You liked the look of the desk you'd be piloting. You certainly weren't being handed just another drafting board in some large office. Logan reviewed the Weapons Center's system of rotating a new JP through different work areas on various job assignments. It was only for the first year, with each assignment lasting about 3 months. The purpose was to help both the engineer and the center find the best place for him. Your first job was to evaluate an existing antenna design. Logan said you'd have to feel your way to start, but seemed confident you'd catch on. If you bogged down, you could call on any of his gang for help. And you couldn't wait to get started. Well, like Logan said, that first assignment was no sweat and no help needed. Your next job was under a different supervisor over at the main lab. It combined electronics with optics involving optimization of a time delay trigger for a laser flash tube generator. The work called for modification of some existing hardware and took you into the area of mechanical engineering. Reducing the cost and increasing the reliability of a solid-state preamp for a Sidewinder guidance system occupied you for the next 3 months. You were batting 1,000, but you were working on other people's designs. You were ready for that tough one, a project you could start from scratch. And Jack Logan was right there waiting with it. All you had to do was design a bandpass filter for a microwave antenna array. A simple, straightforward job. You were so sure of yourself that day, weren't you? Even as Logan talked, the circuit formed itself in your mind. No routine approach for Bill Newman, no sir. This was going to be fresh and unusual. When you showed Logan your parallel-coupled resonator concept, he thought you had it. Next came the critical step. A test of the circuit in one of the center's anechoic chambers. Naturally, it worked. After that, all that remained was to have the production units etched, and you'd be on to your next assignment. Something you hoped might be a bit more challenging. You got the word from the inspector the same day. During lunch yet, it seemed that end gap tolerances on your circuit could not be met within the present state of the etching art. What that meant was that your design could not be fabricated with any degree of reliability. Logan just shrugged. He'd seen many circuits that worked fine in the lab, but fell apart in production. He said to try another approach, but you wanted to stay with this problem until you had it licked. Logan gave you 2 weeks to either make it work or scrap it. His tone of voice said you were flogging a dead horse. Back to the drawing board, and back to the books. The center had the most complete technical library you'd ever seen. Books and journals on every conceivable scientific problem. If the solution to yours was buried here, you'd find it. You talked to JPs in other fields to see how they solved their problems. Chuck was a mechanical engineer, involved with checking the tensile strength of metal in a vibrating flexor. Fred Mapes was a physicist, examining and assessing thin metal films. Carl McBride was a JP chemist, solving a metal combustion problem. How you envied the pretty mathematician who never seemed to have any problem she couldn't handle. You got sincere sympathy and even made some new friends, but still no solution to the problem. And Logan's deadline had run out. Maybe you'd better look into some of those old job offers. Oh, Newman, quit feeling sorry for yourself. You wanted challenge, didn't you? Now, why don't you take one last loving look at your lash-up and figure an easy way to tell Logan you were wrong. It's okay to be stubborn, but don't be stupid. Each cotton pick and filter works okay by itself, but not when they're checked against each other. Center frequency won't remain stable from unit to unit. Gotta somehow transform the shin bone into some other kind of bone. Transformers. Hey, impedance transformers. Why not? Yeah, with impedance transformers at each end of the circuit, you could get rid of those end resonators with their impossible gap tolerances. Of course. Same results, less parts. This has got to be it. Dead horse my eye. Wait till Jack Logan sees this. Hey, old buddy. Looks like you've finally done it. Oh, man. Pooped. Never felt so good and so bushed at the same time. Good old shin bone. China Lake. That's for me. Opportunity. promotions, good people, but mostly the challenge. That's for old Bill Newman. See Logan tomorrow. Show him. Dr. William Newman.
With the construction of the variable atmosphere tank in 1959, the Knott's Hydroballistics Laboratory at Pasadena became a significant contributor to the Polaris underwater launch program. Called VAT, this 39-foot-high pressure chamber, in which water level as well as internal pressure above the water can be varied, was designed for studying the flow characteristics of a variety of bodies moving in water, such as Polaris missiles, torpedo configurations, or other ASW ordnance. Models are dropped or pulled upwards, or are ejected from a scaled launcher which may be driven laterally across the tank to simulate the underwater motions of a submerged full-scale launcher or submarine. During a test run, the interior of the tank is lighted and optimum photographic coverage is obtained throughout the entire trajectory.
This polyethylene balloon is being inflated by a submerged, open-ended hydrogen generator containing 600 grams of sodium aluminum hydride, which is reacting with the ambient water. The payload for the balloon in this test is a beacon transmitter capsule weighing 490 grams and capable of withstanding external case pressure corresponding to a 600-foot depth. Although still in an early phase of development, the present system can be extrapolated within present lifting capability of 1,000 grams, which would include an improved transmitter and a tape recorder for pre-recorded messages. The entire assembly, including a 50 cubic foot balloon and an initially sealed gas generator, has been designed to meet the requirements imposed by current submarine signal tubes. The concept of the balloon-borne capsule was developed in the course of analysis of the underwater surface communication problems associated with moray. Typical system operation was illustrated during the 10th test. The balloon filled in 4 minutes 10 seconds. The generator stopped 30 seconds later, and the release mechanism actuated in 5 minutes 10 seconds after water immersion for a successful liftoff. A good signal was received from the transmitter. The weight-lifting capability of the balloon was 92 grams, in addition to the 490-gram capsule. In its final form, the unit will be carried aboard a submarine. If the submarine detects a potential target, the commander may elect to transmit a pre-recorded message from the balloon-borne capsule. This means of communication with the surface could also prove useful during an emergency. The communication capsule is released through the standard submarine signal tube. The bore liner parts and drops away. Following the selected time delay, the gas outlet and water inlet valves are opened to flood the hydride pellets with seawater. The entire unit rises to the surface as hydrogen inflates the balloon. When the capsule breaks the surface of the water, it transmits its pre-recorded message. At altitude, surface and air anti-submarine forces up to 50 miles distant may be informed of tactical situations. The feasibility demonstration program will be completed within a budget of $70,000. The operational balloon-borne communication capsule system will fill a significant gap now existing in anti-submarine warfare.
This is a herd of dolphins frolicking in the ocean. These two dolphins are calling to each other. We can hear them, but we don't know what they mean, yet. The United States Navy intends to find out. Here on the edge of the Pacific, some 50 miles north of Los Angeles, is the U.S. Navy base at Point Mugu, a major center for the Navy's space studies and missile experiments. It is also the location of one of the most fascinating experiments the Navy has ever launched, a program of studying dolphins.
Welcome aboard. Well, we're inviting you here at Point Mugu to see some of the progress made thus far in the extraordinary dolphin research program being conducted here under the direction of the Commander, Naval Ordnance Test Station, China Lake, California, in cooperation with the Commander, Naval Missile Center at Point Mugu. See, that was a dolphin. Or if you prefer, you can call him a porpoise. Now, dolphins have been living in the sea for 60 million years, but they are air-breathing, warm-blooded mammals, not fish. In fact, they're whales, the runts of the family, as dwarfed by their mammoth cousins as a Chihuahua is to a Great Dane. Well, you see, whatever the dolphin lacks its size, it makes up in brains. Well, now, if you're wondering why the Navy is so interested in dolphins, the reason is quite simple. The dolphin is an expert on sonar, high-speed water travel, underwater communications, and maybe a number of things that the Navy is quite interested in.
Here in these pools and lagoons and at other locations, an effort has been launched under the direction of Dr. William McLean, director of the program, to better understand the capabilities of the dolphin. The animals being studied are kept in comfortable living conditions, and the facility is equipped to meet all the test conditions the scientists need for their experiments. Weighing in at regular intervals is part of the strict dietary supervision and physical checkups for these denizens of the briny deep. This trim, white-sided Pacific porpoise tips the scale at slightly over 200 pounds, stripped. These creatures can do many things extremely well. Until recent times, man was not successful in keeping dolphins in captivity and studying them. Now we can. As we use the sea more and more and penetrate deeper into its depths, we become more conscious and perhaps envious of the dolphin's ability and skill. We know there is much we can learn from the dolphin that will be of great help. We may be able to train this animal to assist us in various ways in the sea, and by studying him, we may learn things that will help us improve some of our Navy equipment. The Navy needs a sonar or some kind of detection system. that works well at both short and long ranges and will supply us with more detailed information about our undersea surroundings. We are intrigued with the dolphin sonar because at short range he apparently visualizes his watery surroundings with his sonar system as accurately as we see things with our eyes. In fact, while no conclusive proof has yet been obtained, scientists believe the dolphin can see better with sonar than he can with his eyes. Tough Guy is blindfolded with a set of plastic eye covers to find out if, with his sonar alone, he can navigate through the series of hoops. Before joining the Navy, Tough Guy was an acrobatics performer at an amusement park and earned his living the hard way. After hesitating for a moment to find his bearings, Tough Guy shows that he can navigate through the hoops just as easily blindfolded as with his eyes open. Can Tough Guy, with his eyes covered, recover this weighted disc from the bottom of the pool? Well, let's find out. Look at that. As simple as a flick of the tail for this Houdini of the deep. A convincing demonstration that the dolphin can tell exactly where he is going without seeing with his eyes.
The Naval Ordnance Test Station has recently completed a feasibility study of a simple, reliable, inexpensive weapon. The primary goal was to provide an offensive capability against radar systems as they may be employed within the limited war concept. Our primary target is the 600 whiff radars controlling the 7,000 guns. In addition, we find that the majority of the communist height finders as well as their anti-artillery radars are operating in S-band. Having established our potential targets, we next considered their vulnerability and began our warhead phase. We have concluded that a 100-pound warhead utilizing the linear shape charge principle will be effective at distances greater than our probable error of about 40 feet. The station's research program on linear shape charges showed great promise for our application, and we prepared warheads to test against the target radar antenna. Here, a small charge is placed at the desired distance for firing. With high-speed cameras, we caught the blast. The fragments traveled at over 13,000 feet per second and did extensive damage. Now, in the final phase of assembly, we see the umbilical cable being placed in the missile. It is the electrical connection between the aircraft and the weapon. The RF section is carefully fitted before adding the next section. As the truck moved across the dry lake bed at high speed, the action of the model was observed. Our aim was to develop a missile which would trim at a minimum angle of attack. It would utilize large wings placed near the center of gravity so as to develop most of the lift at that point. This is one of our arm test vehicles. It is passive, receiving its signal directly from its target, S-band radars. The missile, as it hangs on the launcher, receives a signal from the radar and relays it to the pilot through his headphones, informing him that a radar is emitting. He fires. After motor burnout, Cobra, known throughout this feasibility study as ARM, flies a ballistic path until it nears the target, and then homing is automatically activated within the missile. This test vehicle is carrying telemetering equipment instead of a warhead. Obviously, ARM will home on S-band radar. With such a warhead, as you've seen demonstrated, ARM can be an effective weapon to add to the arsenal of the United States Navy.
Bombing a well-defended tactical target has always been a difficult mission. Anti-aircraft fire harasses the bomber in the target area to reduce his accuracy well below scores achieved during training missions. Operational commanders, therefore, must send out more ordnance to knock out a specific target, but they are hampered by not having enough aircraft to cover all significant targets in any one combat area. One answer to this compound problem is Walleye, a glide bomb developed by the Naval Ordnance Test Station. This revolutionary weapon is guided by a self-contained automatic tracking television system, which frees the pilot of further control responsibility after launch and allows him to escape or attack other targets. Walleye's guidance system emits no signal, thus it cannot be jammed by electromagnetic radiation. At launch ranges of 16 miles, as long as the guidance system remains locked on the target, Walleye will maintain a CEP of less than 15 feet. The sensing element is the camera, consisting of a lens and a Vidicon tube mounted coaxially with a gyro. The assembly is supported by a gimbal system which allows the camera to move through an angle of 30 degrees in any direction. The charge, encased in a steel jacket, exerts more destructive force than a conventional 1,000-pound bomb. First, 8 tight beams of high-velocity steel fragments rip through the target at more than 11,000 feet per second, followed by the blast of a high-pressure shock wave. Test warheads have torn through 4-inch steel at distances of 20 feet and have shattered reinforced concrete 4 feet thick. When the pilot activates the weapon by selecting its station, he sees displayed on the monitor an image of all that the weapon's camera sees. Intersecting the picture are 2 pairs of electronically generated crosshairs. The weapon's guidance system, however, sees only the aim point, the small rectangle enclosed by the crosshairs. The area contains about 25 of the 500 scan lines. When the pilot maneuvers the aircraft to place the target, shown here as a simple cube, within the rectangle, and uncages the gyro by pressing the trigger switch, the seeker finds and locks on the center of optical contrast within this area. Walleye senses contrast as changes in brightness level seen by the camera as it scans the gated area. Within the weapon, automatic tracking assumes control. The camera continues to feed video information to the tracker, which generates control signals steering the weapon toward the target. As the target image expands, Walleye's seeker tracks newly resolving details until the moment of impact. The Walleye weapon system is expected to furnish the operational commander with a positive means of accomplishing his close air support and interdiction missions, with available aircraft, with reduced expenditure of ordnance, and with the expectancy of reduced aircraft losses. Walleye is scheduled for operational release to the fleet in 1966.
Next time on Pictures of Us.
I'm doing research in an area that absolutely fascinates me, and I won't get out of that area unless management throws me out.
I'm Chet Huntley. To most of us, this is the United States Navy. The aircraft carrier, the cruiser, and destroyer. The modern deep water Navy, extending American strength across the oceans of the world. July 1964. Off the coast of Vietnam, units of the United States 7th Fleet patrol the waters of the South China Sea. To help the people of South Vietnam defend themselves against the threat of an armed communist takeover, the United States and other countries have begun a flow of economic, technical, and financial aid, a joint civilian-military effort to build a stronger nation.
I will argue that China Lake really became of age in, say, 1960 or so. We had enough experience in various things that we weren't afraid to tackle anything.
And now, coming of age. By the mid-1960s, as the China Lake activity neared its quarter-century mark, it had changed a great deal from its hurried wartime inception and its immediate post-war uncertainty. There were modern laboratories and decent housing, and a record of achievement to be envied. But China Lake was still pretty much a rough-and-ready outpost with something of a Wild West flavor, even as the counterculture that would define the 60s for the television-watching public began to take hold outside. Most of the fondly monikered Caltech Mafia that had founded the place had moved on, although many did remain involved with the station through advisory boards and consulting. But the pattern that they'd set with their visionary military counterparts, the ideal that they'd created, remained. The China Lake team also had, by then, a number of highly placed alumni. Skippers Stroop and Ashworth, and experimental officers Chick Hayward and the noted Three Toms, Moorer, Connolly, and Walker, all wore at least 3 stars. and that didn't hurt a bit. The China Lake community had grown apace, and the people who came in the station's earliest days with the promise of being gone in a year had stayed on in droves. Few moved off the base and into town, outside the comfort of the gate, away from the cheap rents and the unique camaraderie that this odd military-civilian company town offered. It may still have had temporary housing left over from World War II and bouts of the infamous termination winds, but it was a community, in every best sense of the word, and it was essential to the success of the station. The vast ranges of the fledgling station had been about doubled over the years, and rough facilities modernized, expanded, and turned to new uses. China Lake laboratories and shops could turn out nearly anything in short order, and the ranges hastily established to support firing rockets and early guided missiles had been redoubled, refined, and remarkably instrumented to support RDT&E in nearly every conceivable factory-to-target environment. Plans were already being made and foundations laid for the station to support and exploit the up-and-coming solid-state and optical and simulation and software technologies as well. During the 1950s and early 60s, with a wide-open technology base and a supportive Navy hierarchy that shared a national attitude enamored of new frontiers, the station had almost shocking latitude to pursue projects and possibilities in almost any direction. And the station had not only the cradle-to-crate facilities and the staff of motivated experts to do so, it had an environment, an ideology, that fostered creativity, initiative, competition, and well-reasoned risk. The depth and breadth of the China Lake program was astonishing. Scientific research, along with operations research, requirements projection, and even studies in the nature of deterrence, formed the foundation of a full-spectrum RDT&E effort that included the improvement of brute-force dumb bombs and the elegant application of emerging technologies to integrated fire control systems, secret satellites, and multi-mode missile guidance systems. Knott's was the only Navy ordnance development activity to have a complete dedicated research department, and during the post-war decades, as technology was becoming an integral part of American culture, China Lake was already working with the stuff of magic. Transistors and lasers, computers that could fit in an airplane, and then even into a missile, devices that could see in the infrared and look through clouds and smoke, and ordnance that could literally change the weather. China Lake research projects pioneered mathematics and physics and chemistry to allow novel missile guidance schemes and to further the quest for orbit. Advanced materials for sensors and semiconductors, for mirrors and radomes and airframes. Cutting-edge applications of rapidly evolving computers and software for guidance and targeting and navigation, and for data collection and reduction, not to mention seminal efforts in simulation. The station created new generations of safer and more reliable, and at the same time more energetic, propellants and explosives, and mated them with motors that combined solid and liquid propellants, and added ramjets, too, for multiple Mach performance. China Lake would stretch the boundaries of technology with exotic thrust vector control and hybrid schemes that would allow a tactical missile to turn at impossible angles or launch straight up, and even allow ejection seats to launch straight down. Research projects had gone even further afield by the early 60s. Air-launched satellites, and satellite tracking stations too, and satellite killers. Research submarines, recovery submarines, fighter submarines, and it was no coincidence that the dolphin the Navy was talking to was named Naughty. Research was the foundation, but development was the meat of the program. Sidewinder and Shrike made the papers, as it were, and they were copied by friend and foe alike. But many of the station's contributions remained all but unknown outside its gates. China Lake's projects, however, made a profound impact on the operational Navy, and in the case of systems like Polaris, on the increasingly Cold War-gripped world as a whole. There is literally no complete list of the station's products and projects as it approached the beginning of its third decade. Pages and pages of marks and mods were in the fleet or in the works, AIMs and AGMs, a raft of AFCSs and AN/somethings, code names, nicknames, acronyms, enough to befuddle the most diligent lexicographer, represented devices and technologies that flowed from the China Lake laboratories and shops and ranges. Tiara, Chloe, and Adam Fleer, PBX, Focus, Dividing Wall, and Bohr, Viperscan, Tarasca, Tevrock, and T-Bird, Cyclops, Storm Fury, and Grommet, and the ultimately secret Project Popeye. And yes, there were some very secret things going on in the secret city, things that have yet to see the light of day. After Tiny Tim and Holy Moses, China Lake began fielding the folding fin aircraft rockets, Zuni and Mighty Mouse by the literal millions. But there was a legion of nameless rockets with only numbers and initialisms to identify them through the development process. Bombrock, HPAG, HPAW, SSAR, GPSR, ad almost infinitum. And China Lake had its eyes, the famously accurate walleye, and Hawkeye come Rockeye, and Snake Eye, and Sad Eye, Den Eye, Bright Eye, Glad Eye, and even Evil Eye. Stranger Things under 8-Ball and Dirty, and Cobra and Cupid. There were Elsie and Betty, too, cute names for decidedly serious things demanded by a fleet ever near the edge of all-out war. There were devices to let the operators, in the air or on the surface, see their targets in the dark, or light them up with subtle chemistry, or million-candle power flares. FACS, better known as FAY, went into the field, along with dozens of small, specialized things designed to support a military gearing up for so-called limited warfare. Swimmer, SWAB, and SDV joined the station's idiom. Torpedoes, too, Marks 32 and numerous 40s, with even more mods, let alone Subrock and Subic and Subad and TTBM, even something called Swish. And the list includes ROCOS, RAM, RAP, RARE, and RAPEC, acronyms for projects ranging from exo-atmospheric research to one of the most successful of aircraft ejection seats. The Knott Zoo maintained an odd collection of animals as well, from bumblebees to thunderbirds, with condors and pack rats and shrikes and snipes and sparrows in between, not to mention lizards for the library, or the redbirds, or Sidewinder's big brother, Diamondback. China Lake Fire Control and Bomb Directing Systems began to set the standards for what would become a whole new area of endeavor in the coming years, and scores of fuses, TDDs, SNAs, AFs, flowed from the sister lab at Corona to complement the station's efforts. And all the while, following the pattern laid down by the founders, the station was wherever possible acting in concert with the fleet, with the operators in the lab, at the airfield, and in the visiting squadrons. And the station sent its people out to the operators, to the ships and to the combat zones, delivering the tools of the warfighter's trade, training the users, documenting the lab's successes and its failings, and bringing back the operational input so essential to the China Lake way of doing business. That closeness to the operators, an affinity far greater for the fleet than for the sponsors in headquarters, would be a key to China Lake's phenomenal productivity and to its very identity, as the seething conflict in Southeast Asia would come to define the decade for the laboratory. But that's another story.
On Friday, June 7, 1963, the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, came to the U.S. Naval Ordnance Test Station, China Lake, California. This was the first time in its 20-year history that the station had been honored by a presidential visit. This film reports the events of that day. Among the dignitaries accompanying the President were California Governor Edwin G. Brown, United States Senator Claire Engel, Congressman Harlan Hagen, Secretary of the Navy Fred Korth, and key military advisors including Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff General Maxwell Taylor, Chief of Naval Operations Admiral George Anderson, Commandant of the Marine Corps General David M. Shoup, and the Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, Admiral John H. Side. From the Naval Air Facility, Mr. Kennedy drove to the demonstration area at an instrumented Knots missile range to observe an exhibition of U.S. naval power as support for tactical ground forces. Escorting the President and the official party was the station commander, Captain Charles Blenman. The 50-minute briefing covered a review of current close support tactical weapons and a display of Knots weapons still in the development and evaluation stage. To introduce each event, Commander Joseph E. Schwager, Executive Officer of the Air Development Squadron 5, identified each weapon and described its purpose.
Your host is the Naval Ordnance Test Station, often called Knots, a laboratory of the Bureau of Naval Weapons. Most of the weapons you will see today were born at this station. They were conceived in Michelson Laboratory, which you will visit later, and developed on these ranges. The purpose of our program is to contrast stockpiled limited war weapons, their tactics and their effects, with some of the more effective limited war weapons now under development. Approaching at 9,000 feet altitude, Douglas Sky Raiders, each loaded with 12 250-pound bombs, are nearing their roll-in point for a 30-degree glide attack. Now, the flight, led by Commander Andy Andrews from Brockton, Massachusetts, will saturate target B with 6 tons of bombs. This aircraft and tactic were used extensively in Korea for both close air support and carrier airstrike sorties. Sky Raiders are still used for many missions, such as low-altitude, long-range strikes. Closing at 450 knots near ground level to your far right and unable to be seen right now, Douglas Skyhawk jets, each with 18 250-pound bombs, approach their pull-up point for a loft attack. Now, both aircraft and tactic are an example of modern carrier airstrike potential. The Skyhawk is the fleet's primary light attack aircraft, and the tactic provides standoff or protection from modern target defenses. A vast, low-level penetration like this is difficult for an enemy to detect and counter. The Skyhawks, led by Commander Charlie Banks from Marshall, Texas, will execute escape tactics while 9 tons of bombs hurtle for 3 miles toward the target beyond position C. This low-level standoff tactic is devastatingly effective against heavily defended areas. A multiple carriage bomb rack developed by the Navy gives the Douglas Skyhawk and other jets up to 6 times the number of bombs they could otherwise carry. You will note that the Skyhawks in this event will have lofted 1.5 times. 1.5 times the bomb load dropped by the older Sky Raiders. Now, although aircraft vulnerability is reduced by standoff attained with loft tactics like just demonstrated, this technique lacks the accuracy required for attacking point targets and is generally limited to stationary or area targets on pre-planned strikes. To increase accuracy and versatility to attack small targets of opportunity from a distance, the Navy has developed the supersonic guided air-to-surface bullpup missile. Now, visually guided by the pilot through radio control after launch, Bullpup A can accurately deliver a 250-pound warhead against small, hard targets, mobile or fixed, from ranges up to 9 miles. Having softened an enemy's defenses with standoff weapons or tactics, close air support sorties such as rocket attacks can press nearer to targets for more assured kills. We will demonstrate our rocket developmental evolution by featuring increasingly more powerful rocket attacks in the next 3 events. We begin with the 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rocket, now called HIVAR, but known by old-timers as Holy Moses. Developed at Knots in World War II, HIVARs were fired during the Battle of the Bulge. HIVARs were also used extensively in Korea and are still a potent weapon in our ordnance stockpile. Equipped with fixed fins, HIVARs must be mounted individually on an aircraft. Thus, the number of external ordnance stations determines how many HIMARS can be carried. The Sky Raider, with 12 stations, carries more of these weapons than our jet attack aircraft, which, for aerodynamic reasons, have fewer stations. Our next demonstration will feature the 2.75-inch folding fin aircraft rocket. Because of its folding fin, quantities of these rockets can be loaded into pods for increased firepower. Each Sky Raider in this event carries 12 pods separately loaded with 7 rockets for a total of 84 each. This is about twice the destructive firepower witnessed in the preceding HIMAR demonstration. Developed, production engineered, and pilot produced here at Knott's, over 16 million of these 2.75-inch rockets have been manufactured for the Navy, Army, and Air Force. The need to extend a multiple 5-inch rocket capability to our jet attack aircraft led to the completion at Knott's late in 1958 of the Zuni rocket. Zuni is a 5-inch high-performance folding fin aircraft rocket suitable for air-to-air and air-to-surface missions. 4 interchangeable warheads permit the weapon to be tailored to the target. Carried in a pod of 4 suspended from an ordnance station, the rockets may be fired singly or in salvo. Zuni has twice the velocity of the HIMAR and 10 times the warhead weight of the 2.75-inch FFAR previously demonstrated. Having subdued an enemy's defenses with bomb and rocket assaults, low-level napalm attacks to burn surface targets can be pressed to close quarters. Now, in the distance, at ground level, Douglas Skyhawks close at 500 knots to saturate Area H with an inferno of fire. Few assaults are as fearsome as a napalm attack. Knott's is striving to increase the effectiveness of this devastating kill mechanism and to make it more compatible with modern high-performance aircraft. Better and more effective additives, new fuels, and improved igniters are sought, as well as new techniques to hold flames on the target. Control of target airspace, however, is essential before airstrikes can be effective. Sidewinder